Good morning, everybody. Lively crowd this morning, last day of July. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I appreciate everyone's service on this board. Looking forward to a productive meeting today. Why don't everyone join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and the salute to North Carolina flag before we get close.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of North Carolina and pledge to the oath of state, love, loyalty, and faith.
Okay, so administrative announcements for you all. First, if anyone wishes to make a public comment, sign up or email Patty Hall, patty.hall@nctreasurer.com. That's PATTI.HALL@nctreasurer.com. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted online with the other board materials. We also ask that you please mute your phone or computer if you are not speaking for those who are attending virtually. We'll be taking roll call by name and for all votes. Unless there is an objection, a motion and a second will be counted as yes votes. For the board members who are remote, if you must leave the meeting at any point, please announce your departure. And when you return, please announce your return as well. Those items will be recorded in the meeting minutes. Likewise, if you're remote, please state your name before speaking. Finally, texts or other recorded communications between board members during the meeting, even on personal phones, or public records to the extent they concern the meeting. We'll now do a roll call for attendance.
Treasurer Brad Reiner.
Here.
Jeffrey Winstead. Here. John Ebbinghausen.
Here.
Josh Smith. Josh Smith. Lance Brewer. Lance Brewer. Margaret Reeder.
Here.
Janet Devane Blunt.
Here.
Oliver Holly. Here. Pat Thornburg.
Here.
Kristen Bierlein.
Here.
For Stacy Meyer. Vernon Gammon. Here. Avril Pender.
Here.
Benjamin Bobzine.
I'm here. Good morning.
Crystal Certain.
Here.
Homer Dearman.
Here.
Jeffrey Morris. Note that Lance Brewer, have you joined us yet? We're expecting Lance. We already have Janet. Nancy Vaughn. Not expecting Nancy. Shanika Thomas
Here.
and Wilton Weaver.
Here. All right, we have a quorum. Thank you, everybody. So moving on, please take a moment to review the agenda. Does anyone present have an actual, potential, or the appearance of a conflict of interest in these matters? Okay, hearing none. Are there any requests from the state board to move an item from the consent agenda to the regular discussion items? Okay. No requests. The consent agenda items for the state board are the minutes from the April 24th, 2025 Board of Trustees meeting for TSERS, acknowledgement of receipt of the legislative enactment implementation arrangements, and Aspire Trade High School notice of application withdrawal. Are there any objections to adopting the consent agenda? Okay, hearing no objections, the consent agenda for the state board is adopted. Moving on to the local board, same thing. Are there any requests from the local board to move an item from the consent agenda to the regular discussion items? Hearing no requests, the consent agenda items for the local board are the minutes from the April 24th, 2025 Board of Trustees meeting, or LGERS, acknowledgement of receipt of the legislative enactment implementation arrangement. Are there any objections to adopting the consent agenda? Hearing no objections, the consent agenda for the local board is adopted. Okay, to more substantive matters, let's move on to our legislative update. Amy Awe, Colin Russell, and Taylor Maddie will present legislative updates. So over to you all.
Good morning, members of the board. Again, my name is Amy Off. I'm the Deputy Treasurer of External Affairs, and it is a pleasure to be with you all this morning. Thank you for your hard work on the board. So a lot has transpired since I last spoke to you all in April down at the legislature, especially in the past week. So I'll give you a very brief update on that. Last time I spoke to you, the Senate had passed its two-year budget, which fully funded our pension plans and invested in modernizing Orbit, the state's retirement operating system. Following that, we saw a flurry of bills move in order to meet the May 8th crossover deadline. And out of 1,800 bills, only a handful, well, not about, I think 30-something, Colin, my colleague, has the update on that number, actually made the crossover deadline. It was more than 30, but forgive me, it was just relative to 1,800, a relatively small number made the crossover deadline. Then in late May, the House passed its version of a budget, which by and large funded our pension system and included the funding we sought for modernizing the Orbit system. While the session began with a lot of optimism that a final budget would be in place by the start of the new fiscal year, by mid-June, it was clear that the deadline wouldn't be made due to a handful of sticking points, most namely over taxation rates. And so during the final week of June, a flurry of bills passed before the legislature left for a short summer recess. There was no agreement on an omnibus spending package or on a stopgap spending measure, which both chambers tried to pass a stopgap measure. But end of June, there was no agreement at that point. So the legislature did go into a brief summer recess. There was a lot of negotiations happening behind the scenes. And we worked very hard during that time to advocate on behalf of the retirement system and our health plan, which both had very critical needs coming up in short order. And I do want to give a hat tip to the legislature. There's a lot of pressures, a lot of different advocates out there asking for funding. And I think politically it's tough in your negotiations to address any of the big issues because that takes away leverage. But to their credit, the legislative leaders heard us loud and clear. We worked hard for the last couple of weeks, and then just this past week, they came back into a session and came out with a stopgap spending measure, which fully funded our retirement system for one full year, and also took care of the pressing needs with the state health plan. It was only about 30-something pages long. So if you all are used to seeing budgets, they're hundreds and hundreds of pages long. So this was really limited to the most critical needs of the state. And a hat tip to our legislature for realizing how important this retirement system is for our state employees. Also, during the session, they took up a number of gubernatorial vetoes, overrode, I believe, 8 out of 14 of those. And then they passed an adjournment resolution, which allows them to come back a couple of days each month until the start of the short session, which is April 21st of next year. And this will be limited to very specific items that they're eligible to take up, such as overriding vetoes, appointments. Also, we have heard from legislative leaders that they are continuing to negotiate on an omnibus spending package. So there is still hope of a more comprehensive budget, but at least by way of the retirement system, we know we are fully funded for the next year, and that takes away a lot of pressure. So we are very grateful to the legislature for their strong support. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Taylor, who's going to give you an update on some of the bills that came up before the legislature that affect the retirement system. And then Colin will be giving an update on our bills that we were proactively advocating for and how those bills affect the retirement system. So thank you.
Absolutely. So these are all a bit of new kind of information that you might not have heard yet. These are the non-DST bills that have passed that do impact the retirement system. So just kind of a recap from the beginning of the year so far to today. So there have been about 5 bills that have some sort of impact One of them being an appointments bill, just reappointing folks to the boards of trustees. One of them was a technical corrections bill by the General Statutes Commission. So simply going through the statutes, cleaning them up, making those conforming changes similar to our technical corrections bill, but they kind of go through and make changes to all of the statutes. There were some impacting the administration sections of both TSERS and LGERS for those sections. Just again, modernizing the language, bringing it up to where it is. There's no material changes from those. It is purely technical and making those conforming changes themselves. There are three that have had kind of actual impacts on the retirement system or the administration of it. The first was very early on this year. There was an extension to the Hurricane Helene provisions that were provided for the extensions of completing deadlines and things of that sort. So that was done very early on. One of the first bills kind of extended those deadlines as we saw that those needs really needed to be extended for a longer period of time. So those were done and are around the end of not necessarily a completion period because some of them extend a application period. So it could be ongoing for about the rest of the year or so, but just providing that, for that service for those folks in Western North Carolina who need that extra time for those extended deadlines. The other provisions, or two of the other provisions, one of them is not specifically something that the retirement system handles, but we're very closely engaged with, which is a new benefit option for the law enforcement officer's special separation allowance. So there's a new payment option. Generally speaking, you can receive that benefit for law enforcement officers who are retiring based on your years of service until you reach age 62 or return to employment or things like that. They've created a new benefit calculation for a benefit that those folks could choose based on when they reached 30 years of service. And it allows them to receive that benefit past that age 62 kind of cutoff deadline for that benefit. So they would get a choice when they retire of the benefit based on their full service, full calculation based on when they retire, or that lesser payment based on when they reach 30 years of service, but for a potentially longer period of time. So provided that option. The reason why I bring that up is it does reference an employee or a member, or a law enforcement officer reaching that 30 years of service, which is a defined term for the retirement system. So bringing that up, we do sometimes get questions, but we don't administer the benefit or pay the benefit, anything of that sort. It's just kind of adjacent to the retirement system itself. So providing any sorts of feedback on those types of things, we're willing to do. The last provision for that is kind of come up was in the administrative officer of the court's agency request to extend the mandatory retirement age for superior and district court judges. Not necessarily changing the age itself, but the prior kind of determination was when you reach age 72, you could work until the end of that month that you reached age 72. And the change is now that that district or superior court judge can work until the end of the calendar year in which they reached age 72. So it doesn't really change that kind of age itself, like the full, age 72 to 76 or anything like that, but just extends it to the end of that current calendar year. And for that, I'll turn it over to Colin.
Absolutely. So my update revolves around our agency bills that we worked on this session. So the Treasurer's legislative agenda this long session included 3 agency bills, advancing a variety of policy items that affect DST and the retirement system. We're very pleased to report that all 3 of our bills became law, had a strong roster of bill sponsors for all 3, unanimous or near unanimous support at the General Assembly, and all 3 were signed into law by Governor Stein. I'm just going to briefly touch on all 3 of those bills, starting with House Bill 506. This was among our top priorities this long session. In House Bill 506, the 2025 State Investment Modernization Act. The bill sponsors included House Majority Leader Brennan Jones and Representatives Kyle Hall, Tyson, and Ross, as well as the Senate Majority Leader Michael Lee and Senators Heiss and Craven. We appreciate the strong support and leadership that those members in the General Assembly at large showed in supporting our legislation and really giving it priority. And then on June 13th, Governor Stein signed that bill into law. We're also very pleased to report that House Bill 506, the bill I'm talking about right now, was session law number 6. So that's the first non-Hurricane Helene related bill signed into law this session. Again, so we appreciate the support of the governor and all the members of the General Assembly giving that priority and getting that to the finish line quickly. As a quick summary of what this bill does, and again, through the context of y'all's responsibilities, this bill transfers the authority to manage investments and carry out certain other statutory duties from the state treasurer to the newly created North Carolina Investment Authority. The investment authority will be led by a board of directors who appoint a chief investment officer to manage its affairs. The investment authority will be responsible for state investments, including those of the retirement systems. The new legislation does not change the responsibilities of the retirement systems board of trustees. It does, however, end the investment advisory committee as that entity currently exists. And this investment authority will become effective January 1 of 2026. So just a few months. And I'd briefly conclude my comments on that bill just to say that appointments to this new board, some of them have been made and some are forthcoming. But the House and the Senate made their appointments to this board, one this week and one a couple weeks ago. Moving on to our second agency bill, House Bill 477. This was the retirement death benefits rewrite. We were grateful to have the chairs of both the House and the Senate Pensions Committee serve as the sponsors for this bill. I'm grateful to have their support. And on June 13th, the same day as House Bill 506, the governor signed it into law. And then briefly, I touched on our last agency bill, House Bill 476. This was our Department Technical Corrections and Administrative Changes Act. Same sponsors as the last bill. We were grateful to have the support of the pension chairs in supporting this bill and having their support as it moved through the General Assembly. And this one was a little later, but on June 26th, the governor signed this into law as well. So really pleased to report that all three of those became law and really had the support of a lot of members of the General Assembly. And one thing that I like to include as part of my update at various boards and meetings, sort of the long session by the numbers to put everything I just said into context. The 2025 long session has been an active session. Over 1,800 bills were filed. Of those 1,800 bills, roughly 375 to 400 of those met the all-important crossover deadline, sort of indicating their eligibility moving forward into session and into next year. And the crossover deadline, that period is very active. So about 200 of those 375 I just mentioned crossed over, meaning they were passed out of one of the chambers in that about 7 to 10 days leading up to the deadline. So we started with 1,800, about 375 met that all-important deadline. And so far, 77 bills have become law. And we're really proud and, working on the treasurer's agenda that 3 of our bills are part of those 77. The number might be slightly higher. That does not include the activity from the past few days, but that was as of Monday.
With that, we would welcome your questions. Any questions?
What's the statute number for the special separation allowance?
The statute or the session law? I could give you the session law. I don't know the exact statute offhand, but I could get it to you. The session law was 2025-8, which was House Bill 50.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Great. Well, we thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you. And again, thank you so much for your service. I look forward to updating you on any future developments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just editorialize for a second. I'm new to this world, but I've been told that it's really easy to get laws made. But to your credit, the broader team's credit, they make it look easy. And they have a lot of great support that's not in this room, but it is a team effort that has led to really incredible results. So thank you all.
Thank you, Treasurer.
So let's move over to the investment updates. I think Linz is with us remotely now. Lance, is that you?
Yes, sir. Good morning. Sorry about that.
All right, perfect timing. We're just going to the investment update section. Kevin has joined us at the table as well. So over to you and Kevin for the update on the Investment Advisory Committee and the investment update. To you, Lance.
Fantastic. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Good stuff. I'm sorry for the delay, guys. Treasurer Bronner, staff, fellow board members, good morning. The IAC last met on May 28 to discuss the first quarter 2025 performance of the investments comprising our retirement system and to get an update on several initiatives set into motion by the treasurer. The big news involved treasurer and staff's efforts around carefully drafting and passing through legislation the 2025 State Investment Modernization Act. What this act entailed, its objective was to improve the retirement system investment performance with public and private sector best practices. It aimed to create an investment authority and board, which comprised a five-member board with the treasurer's chair and members appointed by the Senate, House, Governor, and Treasurer. Its goal was to select high minimum professional qualifications and had a staggered 6-year term with a maximum of 2 consecutive terms. The goal of the act was to assign board duties and powers, approve risk limits and monitor performance for the retirement systems, approve policies, key contracts, and large investment transactions. It approves budget and staff positions and hires and fires the chief investment officer. It also recommends actuarial assumed investment returns to the TSERS and LGERS board. Finally, it updates statutory legal limits on its investments with a minimum of 20% in high quality bonds, a maximum of 40% in illiquid investments with an annual board compliance certification, and a board to set limits on other investment categories to provide the needed flexibility. Finally, the board is required to avoid undue risk relative to the U.S. Public pensions. The second major topic discussed was an update by the treasurer and staff around its efforts to rebalance the assets comprising the retirement plan. The efforts will take a three-pronged approach, with the first phase with a timeline of January to March, with the goal of prioritizing deploying portion of the excess cash to illiquid strategies to mitigate any structural misfit and to recommend a strategic asset allocation, the reset to the 2022 strategic asset allocation. Phase 2 consisted of the IAC, a May IAC consultation and afterwards, with a review of private marketing pacing plans, including areas of tactical emphasis, and to deploy based on the IAC feedback and market opportunities. And phase 3, which includes a 2025 ALM study, would be to recommend a new strategic asset allocation by November of 25 and to implement and transition the plan to the new asset allocation in 2026. So in regarding phase 1, to redeploy any excess cash, I'm pleased to admit we were able to redeploy about 40% of excess cash that was we were not taking full advantage of, and this was completed in March. We had a 350, in regards to the growth allocation, we had a 350 basis point underweight, was questionable given our investment horizon, and the public equity has a 4% underweight to the U.S. and overweight to non-U.S. growth. In regards to our investment grade fixed income, cash has an implied yield of 4% over the next 12 months. With longer duration, investment grade is exposed to several key risks, but at current yields, risk-adjusted returns are attractive over the next 12 months. And finally, with our opportunistic fixed income and inflation-sensitive investments, we had a focus on low duration ABS with material yield pickup and limited downside risk. Also, a calibrated credit risk according to asset class.
Yeah, that's so. I mean, Ben's deployments are no joke on just him himself. the water stuff's only going to get more prevalent. I mean,
Guys, we got somebody we need to put on mute. We've got some feedback. All right. Going back, calibrated credit risk according to asset class, and a plan to redeploy capital in 1 to 6 months, and have an option to harvest within 18 to 36 months. As far as where we redeploy that 40% of cash, pleased to announce we redistributed $4.13 billion. $1 billion of that went to IG fixed income. $2.3 billion of that was redeployed to public equity, and we took $1.9 billion from international equity to pair with the difference to redeploy $4.2 billion into our domestic equity portfolio. So as far as new weights from the beginning of the year through May, our growth portfolio increased from a 54.5% allocation to a 56.5% allocation, an improvement of 2% there, with the majority of that coming from our rates and liquidity allocation. So great news there, Treasurer, and we're looking forward to seeing the benefits of putting that cash to work for us.
Thank you, Lance.
All right. Do you guys have any feedback?
Nope,
Hello?
thank you.
You with me? All right.
Thank you. This is Avril Pender. I am very impressed with the results that you put out. So thank you. Thank you for all the work and for the vision that the Treasurer has brought forward to how we get to be more financially stable in these investments. So thank you.
Certainly. Would you guys like me to go through the real estate and private equity results?
Detail there. I think we can skip that. Thank you, Lance.
Okay. Thank you, Treasurer.
Appreciate it. So over to Kevin for the investment update.
Yeah, so I'll have very brief comments this morning. Just to give an update, you can go to the next slide, regarding our performance through June. So after all of the drama, volatility in the markets in April with the initial tariff announcements, we've actually had the portfolio bounce back significantly. So our last quarter of the fiscal year into June, the portfolio earned about almost 6%. And for the 12 months ended June, we were up almost 10%. So in raw dollars, over the 12 months into June, that's about almost a $13 billion increase in the value of the assets. So we're always cautious and risk sensitive around how we manage the assets. It's quite pleasing though to see across the board almost all of our asset classes that are the building blocks for this portfolio perform well, and I'll show you that in a sec. We're fairly constructive around the markets and the economy in the U.S. in particular, but even overseas, there's been some stimulus that are helping the economies there. We still don't know the full impact of the tariffs, right? I think the deadline is upon us for final decisions in Washington, D.C. Tariffs, all else equal, will probably add a little bit to the price of some goods that are imported into the U.S. They will also impact profit growth to a certain extent and weigh on the economy. But the underlying health of the economy in the U.S. in particular looks quite good to us. So we'll wait and see, like everyone else, as to how that all kind of matriculates. I think if you go to the next slide, we have a highly diversified portfolio. But in this circumstance, when you look at the last quarter and the last 12 months, virtually all of the asset classes that we invest in, public equities, very high quality bonds, private equity, real estate, and so on, virtually all of them had positive returns. So this is frankly, doesn't happen very often, but we're happy when it does. The one area where we have had continued weakness, similar to other investors, is in some of our real estate investments, where with the rise in interest rates since 2022 and long-term interest rates have stayed elevated, that lowers the value, all else equal, of the rents and other income that you get from real estate properties. And then we have investments in office buildings. So many of these office buildings are not as well occupied as they have been historically. So that also impacts the value. There appear to be some green shoots in terms of the ongoing return to work, filling up of these office buildings. There's very little construction. So we're hopeful over the next several years that we'll see much better outcomes. But all else equal, again, this has been a really strong period for the last fiscal year, and it's lifted our long-term performance even. Over the past 3 years, we've now earned 7.8% net of all fees and the economic consideration that we pay to our partners. So it's been a very good period. The other things, as Len's noted, that we're working on are the asset liability study. So we're in the early stages of that. In August, late August, we'll meet with the Investment Advisory Committee and talk about return assumptions. What can we expect from the different asset class investments over the 5 to 15-year time frame? And then we're working on this standing up of the North Carolina Investment Authority. So we have between now and January when the Investment Authority will start to take on the powers and the duties for investing in the retirement system assets. So we're pretty good shape in that regard as well. So those are my comments. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Kevin? Maybe if you'll indulge me, I'll tell a quick story about April so that people have a little bit more understanding of how sausage gets made in the middle of all of that. If you'll recall, April 2nd was a consequential day on the tariff announcements, but then the capital markets the following couple days, as it appeared that the federal government was intent on completely re-architecting the trade infrastructure of the globe at any cost. The equity market responded and fell about 14%, I believe, over. We have a reasonably disciplined rebalancing process where if something like that happens, particularly if we're underweight equity, we're compelled or we at least have a conversation about investing at the time. And so we did. But knowing what we knew at that time, it was so unclear what was going to happen next that we decided not to do that. We then saw the pause that was announced a week or so later. The equity market went up 7% in an afternoon. The following day, it went back down 3%. It was only at that point where we felt like we understood what was happening and where the path would lead to from there that we felt confident enough to rebalance into the equity market. So it's not just taking risk for risk's sake. It is taking intelligent risks where we believe that we have an understanding of how things will play out. That decision to rebalance, I think, is worth something like $275 million by itself. Just that increment that was deployed at that time for the retirement system. And so there's always a little bit more nuance to these decisions. It's not trying to catch falling knives. It's not guessing at the bottom. It's having an informed view of when things are mispriced based on what you actually know, where we can add a lot of value. And the team gets a tremendous amount of credit for doing that in the context of a pretty scary time. So more to come, but thank you all for so far and looking forward to seeing the success of the NCIA. Any questions, comments, concerns from anybody, please?
With the real estate, do we have any idea of are there any plans of what we're going to do with the real estate?
Yeah, a lot of it is just pretty basic blocking and tackling in terms of working with the investment managers. And there will be some underperforming assets that we can exit at reasonable prices, right? So go into investments, especially real estate, with a view towards the future and being well leased, earning good rents, growing the rents over time, having good high quality tenants as well. But then when you have something like COVID and this very sharp rise in interest rates, the world changes, right? So we manage through with our partners as best we can, but sometimes we have to also say we're not going to hit the expectations that we went into, and we exit, take what we can, and redeploy when we believe we can earn more. So a fair bit of our work around real estate is revisiting some of those original assumptions. Are they still holding? And then making the decisions about whether to move on or, work through the situation. But I wouldn't say that our performance in that particular sector is all that bad compared to peers and compared to other investors. I think we've all struggled with, this type of performance or this circumstances for some of the real estate investments. And then we have an opportunity with the asset liability study to also revisit what's the role in the portfolio of these types of investments. And I think to the treasurer's, point he just made a couple minutes ago, which is we don't do things mechanically. We try to be intentional, thoughtful, look at all the risks that go into and opportunities as well. I think as we go forward, we're probably going to have a much more flexible approach to some of the investments, and that will allow us to steer the portfolio more towards the sweet spot of where there's a good trade-off between some of the risks and some of the returns as well. So the allocation to that sector may go down a bit, may come up in future time periods, but I think that's a good add to our process too.
The other editorial comment is that we're always going to optimize for forward-looking returns. That's it. What's going on in many real estate discussions around the world right now is decision process of how not to be embarrassed by bad investments that were made along. And that is a counterproductive discussion, but it's an understandable human discussion. I don't want to tell people that I did something I shouldn't have done 5 years ago. I bought an office building or whatever. That's not productive. And so it's, I think, important to understanding how we're going to make investments is to say what's best going forward for the retirement system. It doesn't really matter if somebody is uncomfortable with the fact that they made a bad investment. It turns out the best investors in the world are right 60% of the time. Handling the 40 is important. Grace and logic. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
With all the chatter about the Fed and interest rates, and they've been stagnant for some time, and now some are predicting a couple of bumps lower between now and the first of the year, what impact does that have on the portfolio overall?
Well, it depends on what the backdrop is. If kind of the inflation impact from tariffs ends up being transitory, mild, just doesn't last long, and then short-term interest rates are lowered, that's good. That'll be good for our bond portfolio, it'll be good for our real estate investments, pretty much across the board, I would argue. That has the potential to be positive. If there's more of a sticky inflation coming from the tariffs, if consumer spending slows down more than people are expecting, then equities will not do as well. Our bonds will do fine. And we have a large allocation to bonds, very high quality bonds. So I think we're well situated at the moment, regardless of whether interest rates come down later this year. But by and large, that's what the market is expecting.
Thank you.
Running a bond portfolio with shorter duration than our index. So the belief is that even if short-term interest rates come down, long-term interest rates probably won't. So we're positioned. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Okay, moving over to the executive director update. Over to you, Sam.
So I have a set of miscellaneous topics to bring to you. And what I learned a long time ago is that one place I was employed, if you ever said you were making announcements, everyone would sing to you. They would sing a song along the lines of, "It's a terrible death, to die to be talked to death." And so I'm not making announcements, I promise. I'm giving you a set of miscellaneous topics that need to be, some need to be put in the minutes, some just need to be aware of. But we'll start with a happy one here. The Middle Plain Retirement Systems have been recognized with a leadership award from the National Association of Governmental Defined Contribution payments for our National Retirement Security Month communications campaign last year. Christy Fairley on our staff led that effort. She created what we call HIL, Health, Income, Longevity, and Legacy. And it was the award we got recognized as the brightest ideas, most innovative solutions from across the public sector. So throughout that month, we used real member advice and lessons learned and encouraged on new view on retirement planning, telling people it's important to plan, take into consideration their own health, income, longevity, and ultimately their legacy. We saw measurable results. Treasurer make sure that we can measure everything we're doing. In that month, we saw a 50% increase in group attendance at our meetings with members. We saw a 31% increase in actionable click-throughs on our social media sites. We saw a 30% increase in the social media engagements themselves, a 12% increase in employee deferrals, in other words, people putting more money aside in the 401k and 457 plans. And then we saw a 20% increase in account balance in that 1 month. So I think that was a great success, and we're proud to earn that award from one of our peers, or associations of our peers across the country. Now, I need to put in the minutes for sure. We celebrate the reappointment of Lance Brewer for a term through 6/30/27, and the reappointment of Pat Hurley as Pat Thornburg. Representative Hurley, Representative Thornburg now, got married in May. We're so happy for her, and it's going to take a lot of getting used to call her by her new name, but we're glad to have you here, Pat. Thank you. And Lance, we'd applaud you, but you too, but we've already heard from you. The one thing, and I emailed you guys yesterday, and I hope everyone got a chance to see that list of things that were the business items for the day. We will underscore our desire and will to wish to have a full motion to do a benefits inventory on first responders. That's something that hasn't been done in a long time in the state body, and so we would love for you to ask us we'd love for you to direct us to do that. Another one that's important that don't overlook as a bit of information. We are changing the Universal Resource Locator, the URL for the state retirement system's websites on August 21st. It will be myncretirement.gov instead of myncretirement.com. The .com will go on for a long time. Change the email addresses too, but we're starting with URL for the website. Another one, and you've probably seen some news, and many of you may have gotten letters the dispute between Duke Health and Aetna, new provider of health insurance, new provider of third-party administrative services for the state health plans for retirees and for active employees. It's still early in that debate. These are very much like annual debates between cable TV companies and providers of sports entertainment franchises like Super Bowl. And so these are debates. These happen. We're optimistic that they'll work things out. We are monitoring the situation very carefully on the retirement side, particularly for our retirees on the 70/30 plan. The part of that issue related to Medicare Advantage does not affect our retirees. We want to underscore that. So we're on our choose Humana, not Aetna for their Medicare. And then I don't have announcements, but we do have cupcakes. Cupcakes in front of you are celebrating the 10th birthday of the contribution-based benefit cap law. And so we're not allowed to say that it's anti-spiking contribution-based benefit cap law, but the character on the cupcake is Spike from the Mario Brothers game. And if you want to eat cupcake, you have a fork, because we're done with we're putting a fork in the first 10 years. Moving on to the next 10 years, where there's a phase 1 and a phase 2, and Taylor Maddie will come back and have a very good presentation for you about the last 10 years and where we need to go on the contribution-based benefit cap, CBBC. So now you have only 24 CBBC CCs in the world. And then with that, I do have one more, and this one is an illustration. I've been asked, we got some really good news on the investment front, but we have to remind folks that yes, it's a good year, but we don't get to spend money instantly because we do a thing called asset smoothing. And so this is two pages from your valuation documents from last fall. And so we can always review back to them how we developed this and what the historical returns are in the appendix of that document. And so if you were to look at the market returns from 1996 to 2023, the high and the low, those market returns on a yearly basis, there's a difference of 35%. 20. So we don't fund the retirement system or pay cost of living adjustments or one-time pension supplements based on market assets, market value of the assets. We use actuarial value of the assets, which smooths in over a period of 5 years. There are a lot of other mechanisms in place, but we're going to do a very, very oversimplified example of developing an actuarial value of assets using a deck of cards and a bag of dice. But I'm going to have five volunteers, well, 6 really, to help with this. So the first volunteer is going to be Jeff Winston. Admittedly, he pre-volunteered.
He got pre-voluntold.
There we go.
And so we're going to call Jeff 2026. And then if Margaret is willing to play along too, we'd like for her to be 2027. And Oliver, if you wouldn't mind being 28, and Kristen, if you don't mind being 29, and Homer, if you'll be 30, 2030, we really appreciate it. I am getting the right one here, which should have 10 sides, because that's.
For those who can't see on camera, these are not traditional dice.
I'm looking for.
I will not speak to whether they're fair or not.
I'm going to use, there we go. There's my pen. So treasurer, as the 6th volunteer, what I need you to do, and I have pre-shuffled these, I promise. I didn't cook this. To draw, if you draw a red, it's a negative.
Okay.
If you draw a black, it's a positive. So
All right.
Draw your first card. Okay, we got a black. So it's a positive here, Jeff. You get to put a positive on the first line here, and +4, +4.
All right.
So Jeff, your first number is 4, and each of you get to put 1/5 of the 4. Okay. So put 1/5 of the 4.
1/5.
So let's just call it 0.8.
Okay.
You get a positive 0.8. And we're going to get a negative. So we're going to roll the dice to try to get a return. And we got a -3. So 1/5 of -3, 0.6. negative 0.6. So you're at minus 0.6. And we'll do
Another negative.
we'll do a plus 7. So we'll take a fifth of the plus 7. So 1.3. 1.4. Well, that's why he's the treasurer. All right. 2 more. Two at a time, I guess. All right, so we got another negative and another positive. So we're gonna have a negative 1. So negative. So it's negative 5 divide by 5. So a negative 1. And a positive. So we've got 9. Good year. So divide that by 1.8. So we'll do divide by 5 is 1.8. We're not going to do all 5 years. I think that's going to take too long. I think we're illustrating the point while we were developing the year. So it's got 5 years of returns going to making 1 return for 2026. So Jeff's going to add those up and tell us what that would be had this been the actual returns. $2.4. And so we'll assume that that's a 2.4, that we weren't working with negative positive at 0, negative positive was at 6.5. So it would have been a plus 8, which is pretty good, but that's what we would fund on, even if we hadn't funded on, even if it were a 12 to 15% gain for the year. We would fund those numbers on the average over 5 years. So that's why, even though we get good news on the investment front, we don't say that that goes straight to the legislature to spend or to put into COLAs. Because if we only do that on positive years, because when you do have negative years, there's a negative 19 year. You couldn't take 19% back from retirees in a negative year. So you have to smooth out the assets so that you can deal with the positives and the negatives over time. And that was the illustration we wanted to make. Does everyone get that point, or do we need to do five more sets of math?
Meanwhile, I got 2 pair and ace high, so. Thank you.
But that is my report, Treasurer.
All right. Let's move on to the policy planning and compliance update.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, please go ahead.
Thanks. Sam, you mentioned that you want us, the floor, to ask about the firefighter study.
Yes.
When would it be appropriate to ask that for y'all to move forward?
We'll, when the LGERS board accepts the report, that's on the agenda already. I think it would be appropriate to accept the report and then act on one of the recommendations in the report is to do that benefits inventory.
Okay.
I think it would be appropriate to get the report in the approved and accept or get accepted.
Okay. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. This is Patrick Kinlaw. I'm the Director of Policy Planning and Compliance for the retirement systems, and it's good to be with you today. Our team works on sustaining the retirement systems for the long term. We work on detecting and eliminating fraud, waste, and abuse, and we'll be talking with you a little bit this morning about these types of topics. Before I dive into what's on the page, I wanted to add one thing, one bit of good news to the legislative update that you received earlier today, to connect the dots for our boards to a topic we've talked about in the past, which pertains to UNC Healthcare and ECU. You may remember that a couple of years ago, a law was passed where new employees of UNC Healthcare and certain parts of ECU, the medical and dental school, those new employees are not going into TSERS anymore. Since then, the legislature and, to their credit, UNC Healthcare and ECU have listened to some of the concerns that our office had about that law, and there have been some important adjustments to it. And one of them was part of House Bill 476 that was enacted this year. A concern that we had was that the previous law would have said that UNC Healthcare and ECU could have gone to employees who are already in TSERS and give them a choice to leave for a new plan that they might have created. Since that law was enacted, UNC Healthcare has created a new plan, and it became clear based on the terms of that new plan that it would have violated federal law for UNC Healthcare to offer people to leave TSERS and go into that new plan. So we worked with UNC Healthcare and ECU to go to the legislature and say, based on the way this has shaken out, it would violate federal law to follow this provision. Would we all be okay with removing the language saying that this choice could be offered? And everyone was okay with it, went to the legislature as part of House Bill 476, and it was enacted. And so that's an example of us being able to work together and alleviate that concern. So just wanted to share that example. A few things to go through in our presentation today. First of all, just a couple of remarks about things that were on the consent agenda this morning. As part of the consent agenda, the boards adopted that report about the legislative enactment implementation arrangement, LGERS. Now that those reports have been adopted, or that report has been adopted, we will provide it as required by law to the Fiscal Research Division at the General Assembly, as well as the Joint Legislative Commission on Government Operations. Staff will go ahead and take that step that the law requires. Secondly, as part of the consent agenda, the state board accepted a letter from Aspire Trade High School. And that letter was notifying the board that the school is withdrawing from its participation in TSERS. Aspire Trade joined TSERS on a provisional basis about 2 years ago. And they then applied for permanent participation in TSERS. And the board has previously discussed that application, but the board had never approved it or disapproved it. So what happened in the past quarter is that on June 11th, Aspire Trade sent us this letter notifying us that they are withdrawing from TSERS effective today, July 31st. They will not be subject to a withdrawal liability because they were only in TSERS for a short provisional period and they were never approved permanently. The employees of Aspire Trade will remain entitled to the benefits they earned over the past 2 years. But TSERS cannot pay any benefit to them until they actually cease employment with Aspire Trade and with any other employer that participates in TSERS. If those employees ever do go to work for another employer in TSERS, then they'll just continue to earn benefits. And the last thing to note there is that Aspire Trade will be eligible again in 5 years to apply to join TSERS again if they wish to apply at that point. Okay. I have an item here on the page to preview other policy and compliance items on the agenda, but I think we'll get to those in short order. So in the interest of time, I'll just move ahead. Moving to the next page. We have on the next page our standard report every quarter to the boards on any alternative repayments of overpayments that have been agreed to in the past quarter. For example, if we determined that there was an overpayment that was entirely due to RSD's administrative error, and there have been no situations like that in the past quarter that have either been approved or denied. Moving to the next page. A key role of our team is that we are the point of contact for the consulting actuaries at Gallagher. Actuarial topics are not a major item on the agenda today. I know that'll be disappointing to many of you. Give you a minute to take it in. But what we would like to do is, these will be very important topics in the next several meetings. So we'd like to just sort of situate for you where we are, what's going on. The consulting actuaries at Gallagher are working very hard right now on two things. One is the annual work that they do to present to you their actuarial evaluations. They'll be coming here in October to present those to you. And that's the measurement of the funding condition of the plans and associated actuarial findings like that. So they'll be presenting that to you in October. The second thing they're doing right now only happens once every 5 years, and this is the year for it. It's called an actuarial experience study. So this is a special year for us actuaries. It's kind of like our Olympics or something like that. And what they're doing with the experience study is they're looking at the last 5 years of information about things like how long our retirees are living, or the pay increases that employees have been getting, what ages people are choosing to retire, and many other things. And they're looking at how well that actual real life has matched up to the assumptions that the boards adopted 5 years ago. And Gallagher will be coming to you also in October to present their preliminary findings on that and recommend any changes to the assumptions or actuarial methods that the boards may want to consider. And the boards could take action on those recommendations as early as January of 2026. So those two things are going on and will be major topics for the next two meetings. After the experience study is acted on, then that will be the ideal time for the boards to revisit the funding policies, which are sometimes we call them the ECRISPs and SCRISPs, but they're the funding policies that try to help stabilize or smooth out employer contribution rates over a medium period of time, 5 years right now. So that we anticipate will be a major topic of discussion in April 2026 board meeting. So we're getting to head into some exciting times that we only get to do every 5 years really. So just wanted to situate for you where we are there. Okay. And then moving to the last page of this presentation, and this is shifting gears quite a bit, but another very important thing that our compliance team works on is the detection of fraud, waste, and abuse. And we're bringing this to you today just to let you know about a likely change to some of our technology in this area. The most common type of fraud we encounter is when a scammer tries to impersonate a member of the retirement systems. So they may try to impersonate a retiree and try to change the direct deposit information where we're sending their monthly payment. Or they may try to impersonate someone who hasn't retired yet and try to take out all of the contributions that person has made to the retirement system. They may try to do that online or by phone or different ways. Unfortunately, that's just a very common occurrence in the world right now, and we do face a couple of risk factors for it. We do work with a population that's particularly vulnerable in many cases based on their age, and also vulnerable because they're public employees, and so information about them, more than other people, may be more public. So it's very important for us and our members and their employers to be very alert to this type of issue. So without going into specific methods, we do have several different ways that we try to make sure that the person trying to initiate a transaction is really the person that they say they are. And we believe those methods have been generally successful in protecting the money in people's accounts. But there are some reasons that we want to be proactive about improving. One reason is that we've seen more and more attempts at fraud in the past few years. And some of the impersonations have very nearly been successful to the point where we've had to rely on a staff member's eyes and ears to notice it. And those types of situations have protected the accounts of about 400 members who were being impersonated within the past few years, who had accumulated contributions in their accounts totaling $4 million. So we obviously don't want to rely too much on human intervention when so much is possible out there to improve our technologies. Another reason we're concerned is that with one of the tools that we rely on the most, it's one of those tools that asks the person questions about themselves. And we're concerned that in the age of AI, that's going to rapidly become outdated. And another concern we have is that with that same tool, we have struggled to find the right balance of, on the one hand, keeping out the scammers, and on the other hand, making it so tight that it flags our actual members as potential scammers. And we've struggled to find the right balance with that tool that we have right now. And we know that other types of technology might help us find that balance a lot better. So with all those things in mind, we do think now is the right time to pursue moving toward newer technologies for authenticating our users, and maybe together with some of the tools we're already using. We will share more about this in board meetings as it becomes public, but meanwhile, of course, board members are welcome to contact us in our office to discuss it. Just one final note on fraud.
Let me just put an additional finer point on that. Did not include a lot of that in my earlier comments. We are looking to have something in place. We're trying to move quickly, have it in place before our busy season next year, before February 1 begins. As a part of what I'm worried about is we had to lower our guard in some of these things this year because the volume was too high for us to handle. So we're looking for technology solutions to help us authenticate our members in a much more expeditious manner, so that we don't have to lower our guard and put people at risk for identity theft and for loss of assets from the retirement system, as we unfortunately had to do this year because we had no alternatives. And so what Patrick is saying to you is very serious, very critical, and has been one of our top of mind issues, and the treasurers work very carefully with us and closely with us to make sure that we can obtain the necessary approvals to move quickly. As you know, moving in government IT projects are not always the fastest to move in the world. We're going to push the envelope to see how quickly we can get it in place.
Final note about fraud that's described on this page in red is that this type of impersonation is not the only thing we encounter with fraud. There are others, and we do have an email address and a phone number where people can confidentially report things they have observed that might be fraud, waste, or abuse, and we will investigate them as appropriate. A few examples of the types of things we sometimes get reported in this manner are, for example, if someone believes that a retiree has returned to work under the table without it being reported to our office, or if someone believes that a disability recipient has falsified their medical information or their earnings, or if someone believes that someone has forged their signature on a form, something like that. We do get those types of reports to our office, and we do have a team that investigates them confidentially. But the most common type, for sure, is someone impersonating a member online. And that concludes my remarks.
Questions for Patrick? Anyone online? Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, let's move on to member services, payroll, and operations update. Connie Bass, Courtney Carter, and Ron Chisholm. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Tanya Bass, and Director of Member Services. Member Services is all member-facing of retirement system division. It's composed of counselors assisting members via phone, video appointments, the front desk, chat, email, or mail correspondence. We host webinars with Empower, our 401k vendor, to provide a total retirement experience for our members, in addition to other internal duties to help ensure that our members receive full service. That is the Counselor Center, that is the Education Retirement Group, with outreach, that is specialty plans, which consists of the Fire and Rescue, Consolidated Branch, National Guard, as well as our imaging team and records retention. I will be going over some stats from the last quarter, but before I do that, we had a question from the board last meeting about having reminders set for members to maintain their personal information and beneficiaries in orbit. I'm pleased to share that we're in the process of having banners displayed on these specific pages. And if it has been more than 2 years since a member has logged in, they will be redirected upon logging in to review and update their personal information and prompted to review their beneficiaries. As I plan to have this completed in orbit no later than the end of August. Is there any questions in regards from the last question? Okay. From April to June, we've conducted 87 counseling sessions, 15 webinars, and 5 benefits fairs with a total of 1,584 attendees, 1,584 attendees. We've responded to over 1,000 chats and assisted over 970 visitors at the receptionist desk. Our webinars are a little bit lower than what we normally do, but January through March is a busy season, so some things we had to pull back staff from to assist with other work. Some of that work is some of what Patrick mentioned, some of the things that we had to do in regards to getting people verified in the system in order to self-service when we had a high busy season for people trying to get into the system for tax purposes or receiving their W-2s or 1099-Rs, W-2s for disability. We transitioned out of our busy season at the end of March, and the volume of our correspondence and emails decreased by 27% both. We went from over 10,700 to 7,856. And our email volume went from 10,211 to 7,452. Our call volume decreased by 25% from 32,368 calls to 24,363 calls, putting us back at our normal average between 24 to 26 average monthly call volume. Our average speed of answer decreased from 21 minutes and 56 seconds to 7 minutes and 3 seconds. And our abandonment rate decreased from 29.6% to 7.6%. And I do want to mention, we do have callback assist. So even when our volumes were high, we did offer callback assist so that members could just continue with their day. They didn't lose their place in line, and it automatically called them back. With the end of our busiest season, we have been able to see the difference in our stats, and the teams have been able to receive a little relief because, as you can imagine, one call after another, and 32,000 calls in a month, that's a lot of calls. And you're talking about 32 staff members answering those calls. And we normally would pull assistance from our other department or sister department, the Education Retirement Group, but the volume of work they was receiving didn't allow for them to help with each other. So it was just the Counseling Center on its own doing that. Just so you know, we gave them breaks, we encouraged them, we had celebrated their wins. They did keep an upbeat attitude, and we made it fun even in the midst of. So I'm very proud of the work that all the groups and member services have been doing, and especially during that very busy time. Even myself processing stuff because I just needed to get it out, but that's what we do. So member services continue to review the way we conduct our business. We continue to work with the benefits section of Ron, Courtney, as well as Christy in communications to try to put things out there on the website, as well as our IBR to help get members answers quickly. We try to answer chat as quickly as possible so that we could get members happy other ways of talking to us, communicating with us without having to wait on the phone. So we're doing everything that we can. We're trying to be proactive instead of reactive when we can, to reduce the members having to wait on to receive an answer from us. We do take things, we don't expedite everything, but if there's something that's been waiting, I work with Ron or Courtney to try to get that worked out for the member, because we understand everyone needs their benefits. That's all I have to report on member services. Is there any questions for me?
Is there a, did I understand, you had a question from John Ebbinghausen the last meeting?
Yeah, I addressed that before I started.
Okay.
Yes, about the beneficiaries being able to, yes.
So our hope is, and we were hoping to tell you that we already had it online, but we missed getting it into the build, IT build that we needed to have it online today. But we're hoping it's in the next build cycle, within the next month, to have that ready and have that solved. I wanted to highlight that to you guys because we take very seriously your input. We want you to know we listen. We love paying attention.
Yes, Sam, and it's John Ebbinghausen. I have to say thank you. I mean, progress is this month, next month. A completed product either way benefits our members and is a great leap forward.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for calling it to our attention.
Okay, if there's no questions for me, turn it over to.
Good morning. I'm Courtney Carter, the Director of Payroll Services. Our payroll services group includes outgoing payrolls for our retirees as well as employer reporting. Our employer reporting group receives the incoming payroll and contributions data from about 1,200 agencies. Over the last several years, we've had a large project that we've been working on to improve the reporting system. We didn't actually change any of the requirements as we published them for the agencies, but we are requesting that they follow those guidelines more closely. We rolled that out at the end of April, just as the April reporting cycle started for our agencies. It was new for them. It was new for the team. We had about a 50% increase in our calls we only have about 8 members of the team. So it was quite a few additional phone calls working through the difficulties they were having with their data meeting our requirements. Like I said, the requirements haven't changed, but the vendors that they work with for payroll don't always match the requirements exactly. As long as the file got in the system, they were happy with it and they moved forward. So with that, they've had to work with their vendors to get their files corrected. We've worked with them on one-on-one, fixing files as we could to keep everything as up to date as possible so that we weren't seeing penalties or having anyone fall further behind in their reporting. So many meetings with different vendors and different agencies trying to upgrade their file systems and make sure that they not only saw what the requirements were, but understand some of them. There are nuances to things like retroactive pay and prior period adjustments that can be difficult for some of the payroll vendors that aren't in state agencies to understand. Thankfully, with all of the work that the team did, we've seen our call volume go back to normal levels as of July. So we were very grateful for all of their work. And we hope to continue that. We still have a few agencies that are struggling with their reporting and working with their vendors to get those corrected. This past Friday was payday for our retirees. We had about 375,000 payees for the month of July. Most of those are direct deposit. We continue to hold steady. We have about 1.7% we continue to issue paper checks for. We hope for everyone to be on direct deposit. It is much more reliable overall, but we do have those that continue to rely on paper checks, but we haven't seen an increase in that over the last year. Does anybody have any questions about payroll or employer reporting?
I'd like to embellish one of your points here for the board. I didn't, and I'm dying to say something here that Kristen Bierlein sitting over Stacey Meyer used to be the Courtney Carter, I recall. So I could tell that Kristen was getting the part that was between the lines of what you were saying, which included things like we required agencies to report some data fields to us and to have strict requirements on what's in those data fields for 18 years. And it's taken 18 years to get to the point now where Courtney is holding them accountable and enforcing those standards, because sometimes it takes that long to get agencies to get it right. And so I think Kristen probably started some of that effort, and Courtney has almost tied the bow to finish it. So thank you very much. That was a big deal.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Ron Chisholm. I am the Director of Benefits Processing. I want to start this morning by providing an update on the status of our new document management system. You guys may recall I mentioned it during our last meeting. The retirement systems has secured a vendor to replace our current and out-of-date document management system. And the progress on the new solution is about 75% complete. So I'm happy to report that. We're making good progress there. The training and testing on the new solution will begin in late August. The training testing solution will continue into mid-September. Barring any major setbacks, we anticipate rolling out the system in the first quarter of next year. We're hoping January of next year. So we're quite excited about that. The new product is going to provide us more efficiency, less work stoppage. And so, again, we're certainly looking forward to that. I want to start by thanking our legal team, our financial operations team, and our IT partners for their hard work in assisting us. Tim Melton is a big part of that. We appreciate you, Tim. Anytime you implement a project of this size, there's growing pains, and so we've certainly experienced ours. And so their help has been tremendous in that. So thank you, guys. Now for some processing updates. The retirement processing team saw the volume of applications increase significantly in the second quarter, and that's due to the volume of July retirements. That's typically when our teachers decide to retire every year. This year, we received around 3,600 retirement applications for July, and that increase drove up our processing time slightly. I'm happy to report, though, that the team was able to pay 99% of those members who got their applications to us by May 1st, pay them on time. So that's always a goal of ours. I'm impressed with how the team rallies each year. I mean, each year we are slam busy. We have a staff of about 30 analysts, and they're able to process that volume of applications and get those folks paid on time each year. So I'm impressed, and I'm very thankful for them. So I want to acknowledge them for that. Survivor benefits. Our survivor benefits team made some gains in training some of our new hires and new staff. We recently progressed some of our new hires to more complex cases, which takes quite a bit of time. So I want to thank them for their hard work. They're now consistently processing and completing more cases that come in than we have received. So decreasing our overall volume and pending cases further improves our turnaround time, and we'll focus on that in the next quarter as well. So disability and refunds. The team made some internal process changes there. We're making better use of the different skill levels in those sections, and we're starting to see some improvements in their processing time. So overall, I'm proud of the direction the team's heading in, and we're looking forward to a strong third quarter as well. So that's my update for the quarter. Happy to take any questions.
Anyone online? Thank you all for all your efforts. I appreciate it, and look forward to future reports.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move to a discussion around member contributions. This is a topic that we've been asked about a number of times. As I think people know, the member contribution rate has been 6% for many years. Patrick has, as usual, delivered a comprehensive presentation here. All you want to hear about.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a topic that our boards have asked on a few different occasions for us to present some background on. So that's why we're here today. 6% is a famous number here in North Carolina among government employees. It is the percentage of our compensation that goes into the retirement system as a member contribution. If we go to the next page, just to give you a little bit of what we're planning to cover today. Want to talk a little bit about the context of this discussion and why we think this has come up in board meetings in the recent past. Give you a little bit of history for TSERS and LGERS behind this contribution rate, where it fits into other states and cities here in the United States. Talk about the concept of employer pickup provisions, which is a very important concept to understand, to get a full understanding of member contribution. And then a few considerations that are specific to North Carolina, and then kind of wrap it up with some overall point of perspective. So on the next page, some of the context. We think one thing that's been on the minds of some of you as board members is that employer contribution rates, what the state and local governments have to put in as a percentage of compensation, have been climbing steadily in the first 25 years of this century that we've been in. Here on this page, you can see a column from 2000, 25 years ago, and a column of today. You can see that the state has had to increase the employer contribution rate from about 8% of pay to nearly 17%, and the mini budget that was passed by the General Assembly yesterday, it's a little bit over 17% for the current fiscal year. Local governments' contribution rates have also climbed 8 to 10% of pay in that time, but the employee contribution rate has stayed at 6%. For not only those 25 years, but for the last 50 years, it's been 6%. So we've heard from some of you a hypothetical question, and we understand it's not a suggestion, but it was a hypothetical question about, does that make sense that the member contribution rate has stayed level while the employer contribution rate has continued to climb? These boards, of course, don't have the authority to change the member contribution rate from 6%. Only the General Assembly can do that. But it does make sense for you to think about these things and ask questions. So we appreciate where the questions are coming from. It's very important to note that today we are not, as staff, making any recommendation that anybody change the employer contribution, the member contribution rate of 6%. In fact, if anything, we're cautioning about some of the complications that could happen if they were ever changed. But we do want to just talk a little bit today about some of those issues. So moving on to the next page, some of the history. The key thing here is the 2 points at the top. TSERS and LGERS, the contribution rates for members have always moved together, not always in exactly the same year. Sometimes there's been a 1 or 2 year lag between one and the other moving, but they've moved together. And the second point is that the 6% rate has been in place for about 50 years now. Moving on to the next page. We have some data out there on how we fit in with the 6% rate, how we fit into other states and cities. This one is a pie chart from the Wisconsin Comparative Study, which is prepared for the Wisconsin legislature every few years. And this is the most recent one. North Carolina is in that purple area, which is labeled 5 to 8%. So we're right there. There's about 30% of the states and cities have a contribution rate that's more than 8, and about 30% have one that's less than 5. But most of us, well, not most, but a plurality, are in the 5 to 8% range. The note at the bottom right is really important. When you look at other states and cities, some of them around the country, their employees are not covered by Social Security. And if you have a government in that situation where its employees are not covered by Social Security, they often provide a greater benefit from their pension plan, but they also ask the members to contribute more. So this chart is looking at the combination of everybody, whether they're in Social Security or not. But we think that the more than 8% category probably consists largely of those ones that are not covered by Social Security, whereas in North Carolina, almost everyone in our systems is. Okay, next page. This is a map from the National Association of State Retirement Administrators. The states in blue have seen at least one of their major retirement systems has adjusted their member contribution rate in the last 15 years. North Carolina is one of the few that is not in blue. We have had the firefighters and rescue squad workers member contribution rate recently increase from $10 a month to $15, but that's not on this map. But TSERS and LGERS, and right at 6%, have not changed during this time. Again, the point, the note in red here is very important. Some of those states where things have changed, it's important to think about how they have changed. Some states, when they've changed the member contribution rate, they've only changed it for new hires in the future, new employees. And if you're already in the system, you get to keep the same member contribution rate, but maybe it'll be higher for all the new employees after you. Some states change it for everybody all at the same time. And this map, all of those are in blue, no matter which way they did it. We'll talk more in a minute about some of the complications of that choice. Next page. This is just another data source. It's still from NASRA, parsing out the Social Security issue we were talking about a minute ago. North Carolina, where we would fit in the blue line here, employees with Social Security, and the median employee contribution rate among those states is 6.1%. We're right there. The median among the ones that are not covered by Social Security is 9%. Okay, moving along to the next page. Another thing that NASRA has done is in their white paper on this topic, which I commend to you, they summarize some of the trends they see around the country. So one is that the overall trend is that there are many states where member contribution rates have been increased. There are some states that previously did not require members to make contributions, and now they do. There has been a trend toward states changing the member contribution provisions to say it will vary. You might not contribute 6%. If the actuarial condition of the fund gets in trouble, you may have to contribute more. Or if it gets really strong, you may contribute less. And lots of different and creative ideas that have emerged around the country. But here in North Carolina, we've been at 6%. Okay. Next page. This gets to the really important concept of employer pickup provisions. So we all contribute 6% into the retirement system, all of us who participate in it. The way to think about this is to start with the general way that the IRS treats taxation of these amounts. If an employer puts a contribution into a pension plan for an employee, that is not considered part of the employee's taxable compensation in that year. But if the employee makes a contribution to a pension plan, it generally is taxable income to the employee in that year. If you do it under a 401k, you can exclude it from your income. TSERS and LGERS are not 401ks. So you may be wondering, well, how did we get to the place where here in North Carolina, our 6% contributions are not taxable to us in the year when they're made to the pension plan? The reason is that the federal government did a special law back in the early 1980s that for government pension plans that says if the employer decides to quote unquote pick up and pay all the contributions for all of their employees, then the IRS will deem them as employer contributions for tax purposes, and the employee doesn't have to count it in their income, taxable income in that year. So this was adopted in North Carolina in July of 1982, and it's been that way ever since. There are a couple of conditions that go along with it, which are on the next page. So first of all, the only way that an employer can do one of these pickup provisions, which generally helps their employees tax-wise, the only way they can do it is if the employer agrees to it. It cannot be the default. The retirement system cannot impose on local governments that they have to do it this way. Employer, the governing body of the employer, has to make a resolution or take an action to decide that the employer is going to pick up and pay these contributions on the member's behalf. Once they do that, it can only be a prospective decision. It can't be retroactive. So we do have employers to this day, local governments, coming forward and saying, we'd like to do the employer pickup and pay resolution. And we'd even like to be able to do it retroactively because we meant to do it several years ago. We can't do it retroactively, but we can allow them to do it prospectively. Here in North Carolina, the General Assembly has already decided on behalf of the state, on behalf of TSERS, that the employer pickup is a requirement for everybody in TSERS. But local governments, it's not always the case. We do have about 80 local government entities, which is about 10% of them that have never elected to pick up. Those tend to be smaller local governments, so they only cover about 1% of the employees in LGERS. But we do have some people out there who are still not picking up their employees' contributions. The next page, we have a little part of how this works. This is an employee whose salary is $50,000. And so that means 6% of that is $3,000 that has to be contributed to the retirement system. The middle column is how it works if they are not picked up by their employer. And the way it works is that that employee, you can see their taxable earnings in bold are $50,000. They're having to contribute $3,000 of that to the retirement system, but they're going to be taxed on it as income tax in that year. The flip side of that is that when they go to collect a benefit from TSERS or LGERS later on, part of their benefit associated with those contributions is not subject to income tax. So it gets taxed earlier rather than later, but it doesn't really have all the benefits of Roth, if you're thinking Roth. It doesn't really have all the benefits of Roth for them for some reasons described in the box at the bottom. The way it works for almost everyone is on the right-hand side here in North Carolina, which is that you have the $50,000 employee, $3,000 being contributed to the retirement system. Their taxable income is $47,000, so they get the reduction from their taxable income for it. And then that benefit is taxed when they go to receive a benefit from TSERS or LGERS later in their life. Okay. That's how the employer pickup works, and it's one of those sort of complicated topics that factors into thinking about this member contribution rate. Next page. A few things to think about in North Carolina if these rates were ever changed. First of all, only the General Assembly can change it. It requires legislation. Second of all, this decision would have to be made about, is it changing only for future employees or is it changing for everybody who's already in the system? If the member contribution rate changes for only future employees, then whatever financial effects might happen for employers will be slow coming. Because it doesn't affect anyone right away. And it only affects a small part of their employee population the first year and so on. It takes a lot of time. If, on the other hand, it changes for current employees, that's a bigger issue that people will feel, and it could raise some legal questions that we'll see on the next page. Another benefit that we have here, sorry, we can go back to the page before. Another benefit here in North Carolina is that TSERS and LGERS have the same 6% rate. And there's a lot of benefits to that in terms of consistency between the two, which you can see a few of them listed here. But for example, if somebody transfers if they work in local government and then for the state, they transfer their service from one to the other, the value they're transferring is consistent as if they had always worked for the state, because it's 6% for both. We do have 800 local governments that have made irrevocable agreements to pick up member contributions. And during that entire time, the contribution rate has been 6%. So it hasn't been tested as to whether those agreements would still be legitimate if it were a different contribution rate. Next page gets into a few of the legal aspects of if the contribution rate were changed for current employees. Important to know that I'm not an attorney. I can't provide legal advice. But this has happened in other states around the country. They've changed the member contribution rate for their current employees. And it goes without saying that some employees will challenge that. They'll say, rightly or wrongly, that they had vested rights that were violated when the member contribution rate changed. Here in North Carolina, there's been some court cases finding that certain aspects of retirement benefits related to deferred compensation are contractual between the employee and the employer. So you may have heard of Bailey, Simpson, Falconberry, those cases. None of those address the member contribution rate because it's been 6% that entire time. But would the member contribution rate be one of those aspects that is contractual in nature? There's a question mark there because we don't know. But it could be. And in other states, there's a quote at the bottom from NASRA just showing that in some states, this type of thing has been found to be contractual. Some states it hasn't in the state courts. So it's an open question. Okay. The next page, I'd like to just kind of move on to the maybe the last two pages, the next page after this, which the point here is to help us all think about what might seem a simple or logical way of thinking about this. It might seem like if the member contribution rate could be increased, let's say from 6 to 7%, that employers would save 1% of pay from their employer contribution rate, because now the employees are paying more, right? That might be a logical way to think about it. But there's interplay here that makes it not so simple. And I'll just talk about this example. This example is, let's suppose that the member contribution rate could be totally eliminated. And you might think as a result of that, great, the member contribution rate can be totally eliminated. That might mean employees can take home an extra $3,000 in this example. Person's salary is $50,000 right now, and kind of the left-hand side, you can see the person has to contribute 6% of that, which is $3,000. And if that could just be eliminated, the person could take home $50,000. Well, what this example shows is that you might think that the person could take home the extra amount, but that will put a strain on employers' budgets. The bottom line here, the total employer spend will now increase by $3,000. And do employers have that budget? Or will employers have to react in some way to maintain their budgets? And if they do, will the take-home pay not be able to increase as much for employees as you would think? So this just gives an example of how these questions are not as straightforward or simple as they may seem at first. And there's another example, I won't go into detail on the next page, that goes in the opposite direction, where the member contribution rate is increasing. And you might think it would have a certain result, but it may not have that result for everybody. Final page of the presentation is just a colorful one.
Can I go back and just put them in simple in SAM terms? So if you're increasing the employer contribution rate, paying that employee contribution rate. And employees are paying more when they go to take a refund from the retirement system because 40% of folks aren't going to make it to 5 years. They're going to take a refund from the system with 4% interest. And the employers are going to have to make up the difference in the funding in the system from the additional leakage from employees who don't make it to 5 years. That's just another way to add into that example.
Definitely, that's true. That's definitely true as well. Yeah. This all, of course, ties into a much bigger set of questions about what level of benefits should the retirement systems provide and how much should employees pay toward that benefit. So just to remind you, kind of the general thinking historically in North Carolina is that there's this concept that actuaries used called the normal cost. And the normal cost is the value of the pension benefit that all the employees are earning by working another year. And the idea here historically has been that employees and their employers should share that normal cost, about 50-50. And this chart, you can see, the blue is the employee, they've paid 6%. The orange is what the employer has had to pay for the normal cost every year. And it's been about 50-50 over the years, over the last 50 years. If you were to increase, not you, but if someone were to increase the member contribution rate, then they would be asking members to pay much more than 50% of the normal cost. Now, you may be wondering, in addition to this, employers have to pay an extra amount, which is to make up for unfunded liabilities. And that's where a lot of the pain that employers have been experiencing is from. But this is just looking at the cost of normal costs, the benefits that employees are earning every year by working another year. And it's been split about 50-50. And that concludes the presentation. Hopefully it's on target to the questions we've received in the past. Wanted to just give you a sense of the issues, some of the complexity, admittedly, but also the history of this here in North Carolina.
Patrick, any questions around this topic? Sure. So I think you have a very detailed picture now of the interplays between member, employer contributions, tax policy, total cost. I think our thinking, in case it wasn't clear up front or through the comments, is that this is a topic better left untouched. We think the tradition of leaving it at 6% is well established. It solves a lot of problems. It's not clear that changing it would actually get you what you want anyway. And so we wanted to lay that out in some detail for everyone. I'm happy to have differing opinions, but I think it's pretty clear from our perspective how we think about it. Any questions, comments? Does anyone else want to make their floor is yours?
It's compelling.
Online? Okay. With that, just to give everyone a chance to digest all this material, we're going to take maybe a 5-minute break here and come back 5 till 11 for other updates.
we should be watching along the way and analyzing. And as we're building out our data governance, looking at things, he's happy to do that, or even those small working groups, we bring her with some similar staffing positions, very open. So, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's get restarted with some local system updates. We've got a report from the advisory panel of the Firefighters and Rescue Squad Workers Pension Fund. The status needs the plan. We'll have Lisa Marie Atkinson and Sam Watts present.
The way we agreed to do this was I was going to do the kickoff part of this and mention that there are, this is an annual report that comes to the Elders Board. There was prior to 2013 a separate board of trustees for the Firefighters and Rescue Squad Workers Pension Fund, and that board was rolled into governing responsibility for that fund was rolled into the Elders Board by the General Assembly, and they created the advisory panel. The advisory panel meets once a year and reviews full status and needs. We spent about a half day with the advisory panel at a rescue squad in Graham, North Carolina. We'll do it at a fire station next year. Yep. And reviewed the actual reports for the system, the full operational updates for what the staff does. I had the staff of the system working with the stakeholders for the pension fund to listen to each other and to share ideas. And we had a very successful time and a series of recommendations in there. The new director of that fund on our staff is Lisa Marie Atkinson. Our longtime, we've had several people in that role over the years, and the responsibilities have shifted from who's got exactly which piece of it. But we landed on Lisa Marie. She's a longtime member of our educational retirement group, our UOG team, the member services bucket, and she is doing a great job managing all of the specialty plans, not just the Firefighters and Rescue Squad Workers Pension Fund. She also handles judges, legislators, National Guard, registers of deeds, and supplemental insurance. We've added to her plate because the curse of doing a good job has been given more responsibilities. So that being said, I'm going to leave the meat of this to her, and she's going to defer to Patrick on part of it. But there are two policy recommendations in the report. One I mentioned to you earlier is the advisory panel would welcome both boards. This is actually something unusual for the reports to the Elders Board to ask the Teachers Board to do something. We'd like both boards to direct us to provide an inventory of the benefits for first responders. There hasn't been really a comparative chart made of those benefits in quite a while. And there's always a lot of things that come up each year. And we think it would be helpful to have that in place. And it would be good to have the board direct it to us, because if you direct it to us and maybe I can get funding to do it, then that would be helpful for in the process. That's the first recommendation. The second one is a recommendation that carries forward, and these aren't from staff. This is from the advisory panel. They believe that the Firefighters and Rescue Squad Workers Pension Fund should be enhanced to look more like the benefits provided under the National Guard Pension Fund. Provide a tier of benefits such that you reward people for staying longer than the 20 years now required for that pension fund, and to provide additional tiers of benefits, layers of benefit after that for long serving members. That's a report. That's a recommendation that panel has carried forward for several years now. They wish to still have it in there. But part of doing the benefits inventory is we want to start the conversation about what is available, what is there for everyone, and what does that comparison look like. So they're really interrelated. We want to highlight that. And with that, I'm going to kick it back to Lisa Marie to give the heart of the operations report and the administrative recommendations we worked on with the stakeholders. I think at some point she may get Patrick to weigh in on. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, everyone, for having me. Again, I am Lisa Marie Atkinson,
And before I go into the operational metrics and the goals, I did want to highlight the team because we are a staff of 4 analysts and 1 QC. So we handle quite a bit, but they do it well because we, as you'll see as I go through the operational metrics, that we typically meet or exceed goal. So they still manage a lot, but